The conference room buzzed with chatter as I glanced at my phone, its screen lighting up with an incoming call from Emma. I stepped out into the hallway, expecting the usual small talk. How's the trip? When will you be home? Instead, Emma's voice came through, cold and smug. I'm divorcing you, she said, her tone almost triumphant. I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity of it, the complete lack of remorse was almost laughable. My hand tightened around the phone as her words sunk in. You sold the apartment? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Yeah, she said with a dry laugh. Sarah and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway. Sarah. The name stung, though I'd suspected for months that there was someone else. Emma's late nights, her sudden work trips, and the mounting distance between us all pointed to a third party. But to hear her speak her name so casually, as if I were the intruder in their life, lit a fire in my chest. Sounds good? I replied evenly. There was no way I was giving her the satisfaction of hearing me crack. My name is James Carter, and up until that phone call, I thought I'd married a woman I could trust. Emma and I had been together for 6 years, and while things hadn't always been perfect, I'd believed in our partnership. We'd worked hard to buy our apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom in the city that I'd fallen in love with the moment I saw it. It wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of everything we'd built together. Or at least that's what I'd thought. Looking back, there had been small cracks in the foundation I'd ignored. Emma's dismissive attitude whenever I asked about finances, her tendency to brush off my concerns with a charming smile and a quick kiss. I'd always assumed her confidence came from knowing what she was doing. Now I realized it came from knowing she could manipulate me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the right moments while my mind raced. Emma thought she'd won. She thought she could pull the rug out from under me, sell the home I'd worked so hard for, and walk away scotangent-free. But there was one crucial detail she didn't know. The apartment deed had been in my name alone for months. I'd had it transferred after we refinanced earlier in the year, a move Emma had agreed to without much thought because it meant a lower interest rate. She'd never bothered to ask about the details or read the paperwork she'd signed. Her carelessness was going to be her undoing. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, my shock had turned into resolve. I wasn't going to cry or beg. Emma wanted to fight? Fine. But this was a fight I was going to win. The first call I made was to Rachel, my lawyer and longtime friend. I laid out the situation in painstaking detail, my voice calm even as my pulse raced. She sold the apartment? Rachel repeated, incredulous. Does she even realize she can't do that without your consent? Apparently not, I said, a hint of amusement creeping into my tone. She thinks she's already spent the money on her new life with Sarah. Rachel laughed dryly. Well, she's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership, and if she's taken any money from the buyer, she's on the hook for fraud. The word fraud sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. What do we need to do? I asked. First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal, Rachel said. Then we'll draft a formal letter for Emma, outlining the consequences of her actions. If she's dumb enough to try anything else, we'll take her to court. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Emma thought she'd outsmarted me, that she'd left me powerless and scrambling. But in reality, she'd just set herself up for the ultimate humiliation. I spent the rest of the trip focusing on my work, compartmentalizing my emotions, and channeling my energy into the task ahead. The betrayal hurt, but the prospect of reclaiming my life and watching Emma's smugness crumble gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready to face Emma, ready to dismantle her lies, and ready to start a new chapter without her. This wasn't just about winning, it was about taking back control. The flight home gave me hours to think about how everything had unraveled. Emma's arrogance was astounding. She hadn't even tried to hide her betrayal, as if I was just another obstacle to bulldoze on her path to freedom. But instead of spiraling into anger, I focused on what I'd do when I returned. Emma thought I was powerless, but she didn't realize I'd been playing the long game without even knowing it. As the plane touched down, My first call was to Rachel. "I'm back," I said as I hauled my suitcase off the luggage carousel. "What's the next step?" "We've already notified the buyer," she replied, her tone brisk and efficient. They were shocked, to say the least, and not too happy with Emma. They're willing to cooperate, which helps our case. "And Emma?" I asked. "I sent the formal letter to her email this morning," she said. "It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership of the apartment, and the potential consequences of fraud. She hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, she's going to be furious." Good, I thought. Let her stew. When I arrived home, the apartment was eerily quiet. Emma's things were still her jackets draped over the chair, her shoes carelessly tossed by the door. But the place felt different, like the energy had shifted. I took a deep breath and set my suitcase down, knowing that the confrontation would come soon enough. Sure enough, Emma came storming in that evening, her face red with anger and her phone clutched in her hand. "What the hell is this?" she shouted, waving the letter Rachel had sent. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment. It's half mine." "No, Emma," I said calmly, crossing my arms. "It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own." She froze, her face a mixture of confusion and rage. "What are you talking about?" I grabbed the deed from the file I'd pulled earlier, holding it up for her to see. "After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. You signed off on it, remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork like you always do?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then her expression twisted into a sneer. "You think you're so smart, don't you? This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal, and you're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart." I stared at her, unblinking. "The sale is already void, Emma. The buyer knows it, and they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money." "Oh, and speaking of money," I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "If you've spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in even bigger trouble." Emma's confidence wavered for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about," she muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice steady. "You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice what you're doing. But guess what, Emma? I've been paying attention, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." She started pacing, her frustration mounting. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear, I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, Emma's anger turned into desperation. She called me repeatedly, leaving frantic voicemails that alternated between begging and threatening. Meanwhile, Rachel worked behind the scenes to ensure that every loose end was tied up. The buyer rescinded the agreement, furious at Emma for wasting their time and money, and Rachel drafted the preliminary paperwork for the divorce proceedings. "You're in a good position, James," she told me during one of our meetings. "Emma has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over her head, she'll have to cooperate if she wants to avoid a bigger mess." Her words were a relief, but they also reminded me just how much I'd allowed Emma to control my life. For years, I'd ignored her dismissiveness and arrogance, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now I saw how much I'd been giving up, and I was determined to take it all back. Claire, my best friend, came over one evening to help me reorganize the apartment. We boxed up Emma's things, carefully stacking them in the corner of the living room. "How's she taking all this?" Claire asked, holding up one of Emma's scarves with a smirk. "Not well," I said, laughing despite myself. "She's still convinced she can talk her way out of it, but I'm not budging." "Good," she said, tossing the scarf into the box. "She doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or your time." I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her support. For so long, I'd felt alone in my marriage, carrying the emotional and financial burden while Emma took credit for everything. But now I had people in my corner, and that made all the difference. The final piece of my plan fell into place the day Emma brought Sarah to the apartment. I was sitting at the dining table, reviewing some paperwork, when they walked in like they owned the place. Sarah looked around with a smug smile, her arm looped through Emma's. "So, this is where we're staying?" she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "No," I said firmly. "This is where Emma was staying. You, Sarah, won't be staying here at all." Her smile faltered, and she glanced at Emma, who looked equally stunned. "What is this?" Emma demanded. "This," I said, gesturing to the apartment around me, "is my home and not yours, not hers, and certainly not a hotel for you to shack up in after stabbing me in the back." Sarah's expression turned icy, but she said nothing. Emma, on the other hand, looked like she was about to explode. "You can't do this," she shouted. "You're being unreasonable." I met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Emma. What's unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home, walk away with the money, and expect me to just roll over. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges." Emma stood in the doorway, her face red with frustration, while Sarah crossed her arms, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "You're being ridiculous, James," Emma said, her voice laced with desperation. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a step forward, my voice calm but unwavering. "This is my home, Emma. The deed has been in my name for months, and you know that. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, just like you always do. So, no, this isn't your home anymore." Sarah glanced at Emma, her perfectly manicured hand tightening around her purse strap. "Wait, what's he talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You said this was your apartment, that you sold it." Emma flinched, trying to wave her off. "It's complicated. I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I said, stepping closer. "Emma tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to her. That sale is void, Sarah, and as of right now, she doesn't have a leg to stand on." Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Fraud?" she whispered, taking a step away from Emma. "Are you serious?" "Yes, fraud," I said, crossing my arms. "And I'm prepared to press charges if she doesn't get her things and leave by the end of the day." Emma's facade finally cracked. "You can't do this, James," she said, her voice pleading now. "We've been together for 6 years. You can't just throw me out." "You threw me out the moment you made that phone call," I said, my voice hardening. "You told me you were divorcing me and laughed about me having to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me, Emma, you tried to ruin me. So don't stand there and act like you're the victim." Sarah took another step back, her eyes darting between us. "This is insane," she muttered, clutching her purse tighter. "You didn't tell me any of this, Emma. You said you had everything handled." Emma turned to her, desperation written all over her face. "Sarah, I can fix this. I just need—" Sarah cut her off with a raised hand. "Don't. Just don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess." Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Emma standing there, stunned. I couldn't help but smile as the door clicked shut behind her. "Looks like you're on your own," I said, turning back to Emma. "Now, let's talk about what happens next." She slumped onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "James, please. I screwed up. I know that, but you don't have to do this." You're right," I said, grabbing a folder from the kitchen counter and setting it on the coffee table in front of her. "I don't have to do this, but I'm going to. This is the divorce paperwork my lawyer has already drafted. I suggest you sign it quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on." She stared at the folder, her face pale. "You really hate me that much?" "Hate you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Emma, I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had everything, someone who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego." I stood, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "I want you out of here by the end of the day. Take your things and figure out where you're going to stay. This is the last time I'm giving you any grace." She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll go." "Good," I said, walking toward the door. "And don't even think about trying anything else. Rachel's already handling everything, and the next time you cross a line, I won't hesitate to let the courts handle it." As I opened the door, Emma slowly stood, grabbing her coat. She didn't look at me as she walked out, her footsteps heavy with defeat. For a moment I felt a pang of sadness, not for her, but for the life we could have had if she'd been the woman I thought she was. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by a sense of relief. I closed the door behind her, locking it with the new key I'd had made. This was my home now, and no one, especially not Emma, would take it away from me again. The silence in the apartment after Emma left was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The space no longer felt heavy with her presence, her entitlement, or her lies. It was just me, the home I'd built, and the quiet realization that I had won not just against her, but against every doubt I'd ever had about standing up for myself. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the emptiness where her things had been. Her oversized handbags, the framed art prints that had cluttered the walls, and the gaudy coffee table she'd insisted on keeping were all gone. The apartment looked cleaner, brighter, like it was mine again. Claire came by that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. "Is she really gone?" she asked, plopping down on the couch with a dramatic sigh. "Gone and not coming back," I said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I gave her until the end of the day to pack her things. She didn't argue. Claire raised her glass. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the weight of the past week slowly lifting. "To never letting someone walk all over me again," I said. Over the next few days, I began to reclaim the apartment, piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, moved my favorite artwork into the living room, and filled the space with things that made me happy. It wasn't just about redecorating it, was about turning the apartment into a reflection of who I was, not the person Emma had tried to make me. Rachel called with updates on the legal proceedings, her voice filled with the kind of confidence that made me feel invincible. "The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer decided not to pursue them," she explained. "But the divorce paperwork is moving along smoothly. Once Emma signs, you'll be officially free." Hearing the word free made my chest tighten. It wasn't just about the divorce, it was about everything I'd been carrying for years. The resentment, the self-doubt, the feeling of being trapped in a marriage that didn't value me. It was all finally being lifted. Emma tried to reach out a few times, her messages ranging from half-hearted apologies to pathetic attempts to guilt me into reconciling. "I made a mistake," one read. "Can't we at least talk about this?" Another was more desperate. "You're going to ruin me, James. Is that what you want?" I didn't reply. For once, I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. She'd made her choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like a completely new space, warm, inviting, and entirely mine. As I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the city lights twinkling outside the window, I thought about everything that had happened. Emma's betrayal had been a shock, but it had also been a wake-up call. For too long, I'd let myself believe that I didn't deserve better, that I had to settle for whatever scraps of respect and love she decided to throw my way. But now I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my apartment, I was reclaiming my life. A month later, my life looked completely different. The apartment was unrecognizable not because of any drastic renovation, but because of how it felt. It was a space that reflected Mimi tastes, my personality, and my newfound independence. The absence of Emma's clutter and her overbearing presence made the home feel lighter, freer. The divorce was moving along smoothly. Rachel had handled everything with precision, ensuring Emma had no room to argue or complicate the process. She signed the papers without much fuss, likely realizing that she had no leverage. There was no grand showdown, no emotional plea to work things out, just a cold, clean break that felt both bittersweet and deeply satisfying. One day, as I sorted through some old papers, I came across a photo of Emma and me from our early years together. We were smiling, arms around each other, full of hope and promise. I stared at it for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. There had been good times, moments when I truly believed we were building a life together. But those moments were gone, overshadowed by years of neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I tucked the photo into an envelope and put it away in a drawer. It wasn't worth keeping out in the open, but I wasn't ready to throw it away either. It was a part of my past, but it didn't define me anymore. Claire and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. "You're glowing," she said, raising her cocktail in a toast. "Single life suits you." I laughed, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "It's not the single life," I said. "It's the freedom. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's rules." We toasted to that, and as the night went on, I felt a growing sense of pride in myself. I'd faced one of the hardest moments of my life and come out stronger. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Back at home, I started planning for the future. The apartment had become more than a refuge. It was a symbol of everything I'd reclaimed. But I knew I wouldn't stay there forever. Someday, I'd move to a new place, one without any lingering shadows of my life with Emma. Until then, I was determined to make the most of every moment in the space I had fought so hard to keep. As I curled up on the couch that night, a sense of peace washed over me. I thought about how Emma had laughed during that phone call, so certain that she'd won, and I couldn't help but smile. Her arrogance had been her downfall, and my quiet strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I called the shots, one where I chose happiness on my own terms. And after a long time, I felt truly free.